The embargo for Rings of Power has been dropped, and it's like the internet decided to vomit on itself simultaneously. You've already heard the opinions from all of the early access crowd, which have every reason to maintain that access, that this is a cinematic masterpiece. And on Rotten Tomatoes, the critics gave it a 96% rating, which is actually higher than The Two Towers had. And you can be very selective about the reviewers you get in your early access crowd. But when you start opening up those viewings to the general public, like they started yesterday, you hit an issue with your marketing. Suddenly, you've got to deal with the truth. That's how you end up with reviews like this from the Mail Online. From Christopher Stephen, someone who seems to review something every single day on the Daily Mail, and so has absolutely no dog in this fight. It's not like Rings of Power is the only thing he talks about, and therefore, he has to think it's good, because this is what he's going to be talking about all the time. No, what he said was that no turkey, however bloated and stupid, could ever be big enough to convey the mesmerizing awfulness of Amazon's billion-dollar Tolkien epic, where he gave it 1 star and called it a disaster dragon. Plucked, spatch-cooked with a tanker-load of Paxo stuffed up its fundament, roasted and served with soggy sprouts. I'm not sure you could get a more British review, which is interesting, considering Rings of Power seems to be anything but British, even though that is where all of its roots lie. The marketing and the cast comments are absolutely nothing to do with Britain. Everything about it is ill-judged to a spectacular extreme. Cliche-laden, dire acting, leaden pace. The sheer inconsistency and confusion as it lurches between styles. Where do we even start? Is it confusing and inconsistent because it's not actually based on anything? They talked about stars in the sky, and what they meant is we just made a load of things up, and what was actually written down, we changed. What was once created as one piece of work is now just being split up, picked and chosen of various different elements from various different times, and smashed together in the showrunner's ideas of what they want, not what Tolkien would have made. This is a prequel based on the appendices. Whoever thought that was a wise buy must have been smashed out of their minds on elvish liquor. We can see the budget, but magnificent visuals are meaningless if nobody knows who the audience is meant to be. And it's impossible to guess whether it's meant for children or for hardcore fans or general viewers, because it fails all of them. You saw it a lot even in the early access reviews, about how the effects are amazing, this is epic and breathtaking, about the visuals being just right, and about how all the money is on the screen through its impeccable production design, costumes, and effects. And yeah, I mean, really, does anyone actually care? I will gladly go and watch Babylon 5, even though it aged badly even on the day it was released, because its story is great, the characters are amazing, and what have we got for Rings of Power? I stopped caring about visuals a long time ago, unless they're just incredibly awful. She-Hulk looks like crap, it still doesn't bother me that much. But what does matter is immersion, making someone absorbed in the characters and the story, making people interested, not being boring, and just making every part fit together. And it seems like that's exactly what they failed at from this review. One fight scene features Galadriel in acrobatic action with an angry troll who pops up off stage like an adversary in Dungeons and Dragons. She cartwheels and whirls her enchanted sword in a bloodless blow that's like a highly stylized Japanese manga cartoon. And in the next episode, a healer and her son fight an orc. Its violence is brutal as anything in Game of Thrones, despite the fact that the showrunners have said that they're not going to make it like Game of Thrones, because they wanted to make a show that was for everyone of all ages. Something that Christopher here clearly doesn't agree with. It's almost like someone didn't get the memo. Now, obviously, I'm not against any action or gore, I actually think that would be a positive, but it does show that this isn't a cohesive piece. It doesn't have an aim in mind, a target. It has no idea what it's even meant to be, because it's not based on anything. On the one hand, it's incredibly brutal, and in the next, we can't show that, simply because this is meant for all ages. And it is important to know your target demographic, because that comes into other things, like your story, like your language, like your characterization and how they speak to each other. You have to pitch it at a certain level. Aim it too low and everyone's bored, aim it too high and other people miss things. And the scene definitely doesn't appear like it should be for all ages. When he says they stab its spirit, run it through, hang it, finally saw through its neck, before absolutely being soaked in blood displays their heads as a trophy. People of a nervous disposition should not watch. Then we've got the proto-hobbits in rags, who look like they've escaped from the set of Wurzel Gummidge, and we go from incredible violence to apparently a lovable, funny, and slapstick scene. This is a show that has no idea the tone that they're even going for. There's probably lots of people with lots of different ideas, lots of input, and somehow we had to put all of them on the screen at the same time. Now, he does go on to talk about religious imagery, but let's face it, this is Tolkien. He did say that, well, he didn't want to put things in like that deliberately because it was such a huge part of himself that would necessarily be infused throughout his entire work. So, you know, I don't have the same problem that they do. But then we get the glorious bit, the true awful nature of the piece, where he starts to quote you parts of the show. And they're as bad as the trailer. I could understand you weird nonsensical lines that you just put into a trailer to try and sound deep while not saying anything, because it's a 30-second teaser and you don't really have much choice. But they're not supposed to make it into your show. Things like, the wine of victory is sweetest for those whose bitter trials it is fermented. If but a whisper of a rumor of the threat you perceive proves true. That's difficult to say enough as it is, but it really just reeks of people trying to sound more intelligent than they actually are by making something overly complex for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Bronwyn and Arendelle share some marvelous exchanges. I must follow the passage, he tells her. You don't even know what's down there. That is the reason I must go. It's almost like my favorite line ever from movies. Starship Troopers, why don't they kill us? Because they want us alive. You don't know what's down that passage. Yes, that's why I have to go down it. Why do you want to be a hunter? Because you think I can't. If you've got the IQ of a dung beetle and yet you still want to sound deep, what you do is you create lines that don't actually mean anything. You create a bumper sticker. The order is given. We march at first light, and he goes on to talk about Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon.
Gentlemen, to bed, for we leave at 9:30. Ish.
If there are any of you who want to live, make for the Elven Tower at first light. We're all over the place here. But even when there's no dialogue, the acting is abysmal. Galadriel's elf patrols, caught in a snowstorm, battle their way across the screen with their arms outstretched like a troop of mimes. What's he gonna do? Are we gonna get like a zombie movie from the 1920s? Oh, I need to eat your brains. And it's interesting that she brings up Galadriel as well, because we got another review from Grace Randolph, courtesy of Drunk 3PO, where we get this awesome insight into exactly what to expect from Galadriel.
She makes Galadriel both an elven Mary Sue and an elven Karen who would like to speak to the manager. I can't believe it.
That's the first and probably last time I've ever needed to quote anything from Grace Randolph. Like, if I'm anywhere near her opinion about a TV show, it must be really bad. But he says, despite the mimes, at least there is one advantage. They're not talking. The elves are rigid and just dump exposition over each other's heads. An alliance with the dwarves would be a diplomatic achievement of the age, Celebrimbor tells Elrond. Because that's definitely not something Elrond would have been able to realize on his own. What is Elrond? Well, he's just an idiot. Mind you, I guess he is, after all, just a man. To lift her up, we must obviously crap on Elrond. But then we visit the dwarf world, where one of them hits a rock with a hammer, and then someone else hits the rock with a hammer, and this goes on for some time. Honestly, it sounds riveting, doesn't it? The only well-known star is Peter Mullen. But hiring an experienced and subtle actor might seem like a canny decision, but it isn't. His talent simply highlights how woeful everything and everyone else is. The effect makes it look like an amdram pantomime. Oh, it's interesting, isn't it? The contrast of opinions that people can have when looking at the same screen. Is it just because people have different tastes and everyone's opinions are so polar opposite of each other? Or is it because some people have more reason to be positive than others? Is it just a coincidence that when all the very carefully Amazon-selected people came out with their early viewings a while ago, they were all so positive, cinematic, excellent? I don't know how they managed to pull this off. This redefines what's possible for television. This is an achievement. Grand. Absolutely mesmerizing. Those reviews weren't just positive, they were saying this is the best thing that you can possibly get. It redefines everything you know about television. And then the moment the general public get access, the moment people with no dog in the fight get to review it, suddenly, yeah, you find out a very different opinion. I could understand subjectivity, but going from redefining what's possible in television to the biggest turkey of mesmerizing awfulness, I don't know. Those two things just seem too far apart for one of them not to be lying. But But there's another review which is all the more interesting because of its glaring contradiction to everything they've ever said before. I present you with Entertainment Weekly. Amazon's prequel is kind of a catastrophe. Give this appendix an appendectomy, which I'm pretty sure I only wrote that sentence to make people struggle over it. But Entertainment Weekly isn't an unbiased source. Entertainment Weekly had the early access. They had the exclusivity. They've been running advertising pieces about the Rings of Power for months now. We had their special, exclusive soap opera intro video and article. They had insider access at San Diego Comic-Con to do special reviews with the cast. And for a long time now, I've been able to get exclusive interviews and articles written from these people. Entertainment Weekly is as mainstream as access can get, and they still think that actually it's kind of a catastrophe. But Entertainment Weekly cover a whole variety of topics. They're covering stuff all of the time. One show is not the lifeblood of their website. One piece of access isn't actually that big a deal for them. And when you don't tie yourself to one single project, it gives you freedom. And that gives you the freedom to be honest when something's a catastrophe, because then honesty can become more important. When you talk about multiple topics, people come to you for your opinion and your authenticity. You have to make them want to hear your honest opinion about a variety of topics, and that will not happen if they think you're lying to them. Is that why they say there are ways to do prequels, but the Rings of Power does them all wrong? It takes 6 or 7 things everyone remembers from the movie trilogy, adds a water tank, makes nobody fun, teases mysteries that aren't mysteries, and sends the best character on a pointless detour. And I find this extremely interesting, taking 6 or 7 things that everyone remembers from the movie trilogy. What they've done is try to reduce the movie down to its component parts. They've deconstructed it and gone, well, people like wizards, and people like hobbits, and they like this and that, and elves. Oh yeah, we should probably have a dwarf as well. And they think that if they just take pieces together and smash them together into one unit, then people are going to like it because that it will be Lord of the Rings. And that was never what it was. Tolkien wrote his books as one whole piece. You can't take parts of that, put it somewhere else, and just assume it's going to feel the same. But then we get down to Galadriel. Galadriel, who spends the premiere telling people to worry about Sauron. In response, they tell her not to worry about Sauron, because our strong, independent warrior has clearly got to be the best. And, after all, I'm sure everyone telling her not to worry will just be one of those pesky type A's. Look, the stupid, arrogant, and egotistical, it's our time now. It sounds like what we really want to hammer home in the premiere is that Galadriel is actually just the best person that you could ever meet. This is the power of fallopian tubes! And with 1 hour down and 7 to go, does it sound like $1 billion yet? No, it doesn't, but it does sound a lot like every other piece of Hollywood material that we've had for years. And exactly what everyone expected. Then we get a bit from the Silmarillion where Tolkien imagined Galadriel to leave Valinor to see the wide unguarded lands and to rule there a realm at her own will. Whereas in this, it's just a really basic vengeance story. I mean, sure, Galadriel could have had her own story, which would have fit her character and who she's meant to be. But instead, if we could just make her like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Conan, I'm sure everyone would love that. Empowerment! She free solos up a frozen mountain, war claimed her brother, and drenched the world in blood. And while a lieutenant begs her to end the quest, he says, where even sunlight fears to tread. This is not only accidentally funny line, but it is also the most brazenly dumb. It turns out that when reviewers are actually honest, they don't just say that the show is, it's overall average and a bit awful in places. No, they are absolutely scathing in their remarks. Mr. Elf Lieutenant, isn't the sun-scaring Shadow Country exactly where we should go looking for the wicked god monster Sauron? And judging from what we know, actually no, that's not correct. Because even though it would make sense, we can't do that yet because we've got to do yet another man-bad storyline that no one's ever seen before in the history of television. Galadriel narrates a history lesson, there's a battle montage, Mordor weirdness, and half-cut to halfling antics. This is the precise structure that began 2001's The Fellowship of the Ring feature. Are we hinting there that the show might be following a path of a soft remake, that actually we're going to get another fellowship together, as they've already told us, and just kind of reenact what went on before, but this time we're going to change things around. We're going to put people in places that they've never been to redress the balance.
This represents an acknowledgement of where we have been and a will to get to where we need to be.
And we're going to turn all of those pesky M's to F, because this is, after all, 2022, and that means it's necessary. These are obvious reference points, but do the show no justice. A dwarf complains to an elf that you miss my wedding, but the mood is stilted and dull. They ride an elevator. You can almost feel the author's contempt dripping off the page. People worry that there may be bigger things than interpersonal relations, because, you know, this show's going to be nothing but a soap opera. I just can't wait for the show to focus on a single mother who sweet chats an elf that can't physically exist in the universe. And then the reviewer backs up what we've heard before, the fact that the script seems to be trying to be intelligent and deep, and yet just comes out with meaningless bumper sticker drivel. Things like, the same wind that seeks to blow out a fire may also cause its spread. Oh, I've got chills. Although that may be my brain liquefying and dribbling out of my nose. Nori says about something, it's like there's a reason this happened. Like I was supposed to find him. Oh, we're talking about fate, the power to control one's destiny, or a greater intelligence which actually controls everything. Or it's just bad script writing. I'll let you decide down in the comments below. But then we get Amazon only made 2 episodes available to the critics. Maybe things will pick up, because it's not just the first episode which is boring trash, it's the second one as well, apparently. Owain and Sophia have a sitcom couple spark as Moria marrieds. Oh, it's almost like Tolkien's spirit just runs through the showrunners when you hear quotes like that. Clark is a rising star. She imports the film's obsessive mania to a role that mainly constitutes the kind of random encounter duels that torment Final Fantasy players. The other characters are so lame, I was rooting for the orcs. Now, at least this is a different perspective, as this one says that Clark actually can act, but describing her action as random encounters from Final Fantasy has got to be damning, hasn't it? Every gamer has felt the frustration of just wanting to get across a field, and yet all you do is hit battle after battle, completely unconnected when you don't want any of them to actually occur. Yeah, I could absolutely understand the frustration. And having watched various other shows where I want the villain to actually succeed, finding out that this is going to be another one isn't a surprise. If we've not been able to tell for the cast interviews before, there's every single sign and language cue that they use, which just show that the characters are going to be completely arrogant, egotistical, and utterly insufferable. Especially when you come up with the fact that Galadriel's going to be amazing, tell everyone, oh, this is happening, and they just go, no, Galadriel, no, you're just stupid. Go back over there where you belong. Go over there, go over there. Seriously, the message is like getting hit in the face with a sledgehammer. But don't worry, because if you are hungry for Middle-earth, you know, kind of desperate and just so starving for something to talk about that you'll accept any old tripe, well then, you could be satisfied a bit. I mean, I guess you could argue that Rings of Power is no worse than all those other expensive, empty genre adventures. If you have a habit of liking trash, this is some more trash. I'm sure you could be satisfied then, he guesses. These shows have proliferated the streaming era, but this series is a special catastrophe of ruined potential, sacrificing a glorious universe's limitless possibilities at the altar of tried and true blockbuster desperation. What do you know? Is it unexpected? No, I don't think it is, but I do think it's incredibly interesting that you can go from something like this, a show which redefines what's possible for television, that it's an achievement, immersive, epic, absolutely mesmerizing, to a review from a website which had exclusive access and pushed this show for months, only for even them to come out and say this series is a special catastrophe of ruined potential. It sacrificed a glorious universe of limitless possibilities. And all we got out of those limitless possibilities is this. The same old dross that we've seen in so many series, with the same old talking points, the same old script writing tricks, the same old boring, empty lines that you're supposed to think is deep, and yet only actually have the ability to fool someone with the IQ of a ferret. I'm not surprised that bad reviews came out, but I wasn't expecting it from Entertainment Weekly, and I was not expecting anything as scathing as this, or as scathing as the one from Christopher Stevens. When even Grace Randolph is coming out and attacking your main primary character in the show, the one you've pushed as the point of your empowerment to the power of fallopian tubes. No, I'm not surprised surprised that bad reviews came out, but I thought it would be from the audience. I thought when the show came out to the public throughout the cinemas, that's when we hear on threads and forums that actually this isn't very good. And it turns out that this is so awful that even the websites which pushed it so significantly, they can't handle it. Because their entire reputation would be destroyed if they tried to pretend it was something that it wasn't. This is so awful, they can't even fake liking it, without completely destroying any sense of authenticity which they might have. So yes, the first early access people may have said that this was absolutely mesmerizing. The Rotten Tomato critics may well have given it a score which is higher than the Two Towers, but too many people have seen it. Too many people haven't tied their future in trying to pretend that this show is something that it isn't. And that means that you can get the truth, that you can get scathing reviews from people which absolutely annihilate the show days before its release. And at this point, the genie's out of the bottle, and it ain't going back in. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Like the video if you like the video, subscribe. More videos like this over the future. There's going to be a lot of Rings of Power stuff coming, as well as my own review. So if you like that, subscribe. Like the video if you like the video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.